So today we celebrate the feast day of St. Mark, evangelist. Of course, we know he wrote the Gospel of Mark. And this beautiful thing about the Gospel of Mark, when we look at this Gospel, it's the shortest of the Gospels, and yet a lot of his stories end up having a lot more detail than some of the other Gospels. And so while he has less teaching and preaching than like Matthew or Luke, there's a lot of detail in some of the stories. And the tradition is that he was the scribe basically of St. Peter, and we hear in the first reading from the St. Peter how he was how Mark was with Peter in Rome. So we know that they certainly did know each other and were together. But you can see this throughout the Gospel of Mark. Whenever it's the Gospel that really talks about all the foibles of Peter. And every time there's something good said about Peter, it's always followed by something bad, always. So we see that, because Peter wouldn't praise himself. He wouldn't be saying, "Oh, look at me, aren't I a great guy?" But rather they speak about he would say, no, these are the things that I did wrong in following Jesus. But we look at this and we see how Mark was also one of the people that worked with Paul. So he was the cousin to Barnabas, whose real name was Joseph, but people called him Barnabas, son of encouragement. And so Barnabas was so good about drawing people into ministry, pulling on their talents. He pulled Saul out and worked with him as he became the great apostle that he was, but he also pulled out his cousin Mark. And so in the first missionary journey, he and Mark and Paul were going around throughout Asia Minor, aka Turkey, and speaking God's name. But Mark got, homesick or tired or something, and so he left. And so then when they were getting ready for the second missionary journey, Barnabas says, "Well, I want Mark to come with me." Well, Paul wasn't so happy about that. He says, "He deserted us before, we're not going with him this time." And so then at that point, Paul and Barnabas split up. Now ultimately, there was a reconciliation between Paul and Mark later in life, but we look at this and we say, God is a God of second chances. So often we look, well, I tried doing that and I failed. Well, I'll never be able to do this. Looking at Mark and how he deserted the ministry. But God gave him a second chance through Barnabas. And look at what became of him. He ended up writing the gospel, which is one of the great treasures we have in our church. And too often, we give up on ourselves before God does. We look at our failures and we say, well, that's it, I'm done, I can't do this, I'm not cut out for this. We look at how we try to live our faith and how much we fail, and we just say, well, I can't do this. How can I witness to people about the faith when I'm such a failure? And the Lord says, well, try again. Try again. Try again. As Pope Francis says, God never tires of forgiving us. It is we who tire of asking for forgiveness. This day, through the intercession of St. Mark, may we not get discouraged by our failures, but rather turn to the Lord and ask for the courage to get up again, to try again to follow Him, to do His will, to fulfill His mission in our lives.